Hi Year 9. Today I'm going to show you a sample story that I have written so that you can see an example of what you're going to produce, and I'm going to step you through my thought processes. So first of all, I would like you to read pages 45 through to page 50. This is where my story is set. So on page 45 it begins with, "Damn right he is," said Carlson. "God Almighty, that dog stinks. Get him out of here, Candy. I don't know nothing that stinks as bad as an old dog. You got to get him out." That's the beginning. Read that through, and then you're going to go to page 50, where at the top of the page, a little bit down, it says, "For a moment he continued to stare at the ceiling, then he rolled slowly over and faced the wall and lay silent." That's the section that my story occurs. So pause this now, read that so you get the context of my story, and then press play again and I'll walk you through my sample. Pause now. Okay, so welcome back. So you've just read this section where Candy's dog's taken from him and shot, and we've discussed the fact that the dog, just like Candy, is deemed to be old and useless and therefore is put out of its misery. So I've chosen to write this scene because I think Candy's an interesting character. First of all, he doesn't have much of a voice in the text. Secondly, he clearly shows some themes throughout the book. He is lonely, he is isolated, and as an elderly crippled man, he faces prejudice. So those are some things that I wanted to explore with him. So I'm going to start reading to you now my story, and I want you to take note of how I have tried to copy some of Steinbeck's language. "I stared at Slim. I stared and stared, but that Slim, he done nothing. Just said I have to let Carlson take my dog and shoot him. I couldn't watch as Carlson led him out of the bunkhouse. Couldn't even say goodbye to him. Hurt too much to see him go. To watch him let out only to be thrown away, just because some guys don't think he's no good to anyone no more. So I just lay back on my bed and stared at the ceiling, stared and waited for that brute Carlson to put a bullet in my dog's head. It was quiet in the room. The silence crept in after they took my dog and settled there, unmoving and loyal, just like he was. By God, he was the best goddamn sheepdog I ever seen. Never seen none like him, before or since. I had him since I was a pup. Picked him up from the litter myself. Remember it like it was yesterday, picking him up from the litter. Back then I was strong. I was young. I was a hard worker. And I needed a dog that could keep up with me. I looked down into that litter and I saw the bitch with her pups all around her. But not him. He was different. He was all alone, sitting off to the side, and he looked at me and I knew he was the one. He could look after himself. He was like me, didn't need no one and could take care of himself. And I says to the fella, "That one there, that's the one I want." And the fella gave me a funny look just because he was the littlest one, but I didn't care. He was the one I wanted. And when I held him that first time, he was so soft and warm, I just pet him. From that day, I wasn't lonely no more. I had him and he had me, and we went everywhere together. He was the best goddamn sheepdog I ever seen. He could round 'em up faster than any dog, and all them other boys would say, "By God, Candy, but that dog can run." Together we was the best team going round. But that was before. Back when I still had my hand and he was still young. When did we get so old? And how did we end up like this, with no one to look out for us, and to just let other younger men push us around and tell us when we were no good no more? The dog was plenty good. He was still walking and wagging his tail, and then they just go and shoot him like it didn't mean nothing. It ain't right. It ain't fair. So I just keep looking up at the ceiling, and I can feel them other boys looking at me, but I ain't going to say a word. They can just sit there in silence and think about what they'd done, what they just took from me. I can feel my eyes start to burn, but by God, I ain't going to let 'em see me cry. That new fella George starts to play cards, but I can tell they don't want to play. They's just trying to fill up the gaping silence, trying to pretend that it's just a normal night, but it ain't. They're going to kill my dog. They're going to kill my dog. And what am I supposed to do then? I ain't got no one to talk to or to keep me company. No one wants to spend their time talking to old Candy, who's no good to nobody with his one hand and his old bones. Why couldn't they just let me leave him? Why couldn't they just leave him alone? Just let me have him. He wasn't doing no harm. And so what if he stinks a bit? So what? They don't mean he's no good. Slim says I can have one of the bitch's new pups. The big fella Lenny is all choked up about getting his own pup. I guess that's because he's still so young. He's still got time for it. But what do I want with some pup that ain't been trained up yet? I ain't got the energy to keep up with it. What am I going to do? Train it up to run sheep? I ain't got that in me no more. I ain't much good except for cooking and hoeing. Don't need no pup for that. Didn't used to be like that though. Once thought I was going to get out of here, be my own man, my own boss. But then I lost my hand and it was all over. Just another useless old cripple, just another mouth to feed. There it went, the shot. It cracked like a whip through the night air. I can feel the boys all looking at me, but I can't say nothing. I just wish I could go someplace and be alone. I roll over on my side, turn my back to the lot of them. Don't want to look at them, and don't want them looking at me. I just wish it could all be different, but there ain't no use in an old cripple's wishing. Okay, so let's have a quick discussion of what I've done. So I think the most obvious thing that hopefully stood out to you is that I've deliberately used, like Steinbeck, the slang. So you need to think about putting in those apostrophes. So this should have been him. I skipped the H, and to indicate that, I put the apostrophe at the start. Nothing would ordinarily require a G, but I want to sound like Candy, so I take it out, so I replace it with an apostrophe. It gets a bit clunky. You have to remember to do that as you go through, and that might happen in the editing process. But have a think about what your character sounds like, and are you capturing their voice? The next thing I'll quickly draw your attention to is my paragraphing. So this is in the present. He's sitting on the bed, he's staring at Slim, they've taken his dog from him. And then I skip time and I go to a flashback. I have Candy remember when he first got the dog. To indicate that there's a flash in time, a shift, I go to a brand new paragraph. So that's something that you can do as well. When time shifts or when an idea significantly changes, you need a new paragraph. So then all of this is his flashback of when he's remembering getting the dog. And now here's a new line because I come back to the present. I just keep looking at the ceilings. Now I'm back in the story of Mice and Men. And this, you can't really see it very well, but this is another line drop here, another paragraph, because the shot's gone. So it's a significant shift in what I want to talk about. Okay, so you still, even though it's creative, you are still required to paragraph, because if I get a big chunk of writing, it's too much. I'm hoping you can see some of the themes that I'm picking up. So I've got the fact that in this flashback, I've got the fact that he was once young, but he's lost that life he thought he would have. So kind of like the prejudice of here. When did we get so old? How did we end up like this, with no one to look out for us and to just let other younger men push us around and tell us when we're no good anymore? That's prejudice that I'm talking about in there. Sorry, excuse me. Down here, I talk about how he used to think he was going to get out and be his own boss, but it didn't happen. He lost his hand. Life got in the way. That's broken dreams. And then here, I talk about the fact that, I ain't got no one to talk to or keep me company. No one wants to spend their time talking to old Candy. So there's the loneliness coming through. So in the piece, I need to be able to see strong thematic links to what's going on. So what you're going to do is, you've seen how I've selected my section from Of Mice and Men, and then I've created a story out of it. So what you need to do is, if you're writing about Curly's wife, you need to go back into the book and you need to reread Curly's wife's section carefully. You need to think about the scene that you're going to write. If you're doing Crooks, you need to go to chapter 4 and you need to reread what happens to Crooks. If you're doing George when he decides to shoot Lenny, you need to go to the end of that book and you need to reread that. That's not enough though. You need to go to the start where he's talking about how much Lenny means to him. You need to know your character inside and out in order to get a high mark. So for the remainder of this lesson, go back through, reread any section that is important to your character. Take some notes or add to your brainstorm. Okay, so I want you to build up this clear picture of your character, and then I want you to start planning out your story. So you can just give me some dot points down the page, what is going to happen in your story, and we're going to start looking at how to write that next week. You can email me with any questions that you have, and I will be seeing you next week where we can start this properly. I'm going to create an upload task on Simon where you can put your plan. So I'm going to give you the weekend to do that. So please make sure that you've got that uploaded by Monday. Tomorrow's our library session, so no Zoom tomorrow, and you are welcome to read a book of your choice. I'll send you a prompt and you can just dot point down some key points on one note that you've read. All right, thanks Year 9.